My name is Ruth Carrington. I'm 70 years old this year. I was the founder and managing partner of Carrington Ledger Group, a tax consultancy firm I built from scratch after my husband passed, just me, a calculator, and a baby boy who needed to eat. Last month, I sold that company for $53 million. Everyone said I should celebrate, so I did. I hosted a retirement party in the house where I raised my son, buried my husband, and lined every brick and beam with the quiet years of sacrifice. The champagne sparkled. The string quartet played Vivaldi. The windows glowed gold in the early evening light. It was beautiful, except for one thing: Samantha. My daughter-in-law had taken charge of the planning, which was strange. Samantha had never so much as lifted a hand to load a dishwasher without sighing like it would break her nails. But that night, she was a different woman, organizing florals, polishing crystal, telling the caterer how I liked my brie, and then she did something that made my blood run still. She kept glancing at the champagne table, specifically one glass, the glass with the chip. That chip wasn't visible unless you knew it was there, at the base of the stem, just slightly rough to the touch. I always used that glass. It was part of a set from my wedding registry. Every other glass had broken over the years, but that one remained. Familiar. Sentimental. I never told anyone why I kept it. But Samantha knew. She knew enough to choose that exact glass. I watched from across the kitchen, my hand still mid-gesture in conversation with a former colleague, as she pulled something small from her purse. A vial, glass, no label. She poured just a few drops into the chipped flute, checked over her shoulder, then moved away, blending into the crowd like nothing had happened. I didn't flinch, didn't speak, didn't run to the police. I just watched her smile, pick up the glass, and start making her way toward me. I could hear the silver clinking from guests toasting, glasses raised, laughter rising with the champagne bubbles. I stayed exactly where I was. "Ruth," she said, voice sweet as syrup, "you look exhausted. Here, have some champagne. You've more than earned it." I took the glass from her, smiled, clinked it with hers, and waited. I waited 10 minutes, long enough for her to get distracted showing off her new tennis bracelet, a gift from Blake, my son. She laughed with the neighbors, her eyes glittering, her tone just right. No one would ever guess what she had just tried to do. That's when I walked over to her mother, Carol. Poor Carol always looked lost at parties, like she wasn't sure if she was a guest or part of the furniture. She didn't notice when I placed my glass down near her clutch. She didn't hesitate when she picked it up, assuming it was hers. Within minutes, she took a sip, commented on the interesting flavor of the champagne, and began swaying slightly as she reached for another canapé. Then she collapsed. The flute slipped from her hand and shattered. Her mouth began to foam. Her limbs convulsed. Someone screamed. The string quartet stopped mid-measure. Glass crunched under a waiter's shoes as he rushed toward her, and all I could think was, that wasn't supposed to happen to her. Samantha's shriek nearly pierced the chandelier. "Someone call 911, she sobbed. "Oh my God, Mom, Mom!" She knelt beside Carol, crying, gasping, holding her limp hand. It was a good performance, a very good one, almost convincing. But panic, real panic, doesn't look like that. It doesn't come with well-timed sobs or glances to see who's watching. It's jagged, raw, wild, and Samantha was calculating. I stayed back near the marble island, watching. Blake appeared in the doorway, pushing through the crowd. His face was pale, eyes wide, voice shaking. What happened? That's when I saw it. Just for a second. A flicker. A glance that passed from Samantha to Blake. Too long to be random, too short to be obvious. But it was there. Like a thread connecting them in something far older than this moment. She clutched my arm. "Ruth, I don't know. She was fine, and then she collapsed." The paramedics arrived less than 5 minutes later. As they loaded Carol onto the stretcher, Samantha kept holding my hand like we were bonded through trauma. Blake stood beside us, unusually quiet. And me? I was watching the corner of the champagne table. The other glasses were still there, but not mine. The one with the chip had done its job. If you've made it this far, I imagine you've seen enough to know this isn't just a story about a party gone wrong. It's about something deeper, older, quieter. And if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal in your own family, stick with me. You're not alone. And some things, they don't stay buried forever. Let me take you back to where it began. I slipped away quietly, down the hallway I'd walked 1,000 times. The laughter behind me was dimming, replaced by sirens and murmurs. Blake had gone to ride in the ambulance with Carol. Samantha was coordinating with the EMTS. I knew she wanted to be seen helping. She always did. But I had no more interest in the performance. Not tonight, not anymore. I stepped into my study and closed the door behind me. The sound was soft but final. The lights were still warm from earlier, and the faint scent of my husband's cologne lingered in the fabric of the old armchair. It always did when the weather changed. I sat down at the desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out the remote for the security system. I'd installed the cameras 3 years ago after the garden gate was left open one too many times. Everyone thought it was paranoia. But the thing about getting older isn't just that you lose people. It's that you start seeing who's trying to sneak in when they think you're too tired to watch. I clicked open the camera feed, the kitchen, the dining room, the hallway, and yes, the butler's pantry, right where the champagne table stood. I scrolled back through the footage, rewind, pause, rewind, until the screen froze on the exact moment I remembered. Samantha, elegant in her cream dress, smiling just enough, and in her hand a tiny vial. She leaned over the table, and for a second her face shifted. The smile faded. Her hand trembled, just briefly, before she uncorked the vial and tilted it over a single glass. The glass, the one with the chip. I paused the feed, zoomed in. Her hand was steady again. Her eyes were laser-focused. That wasn't hesitation. That was calculation. And something inside me cracked, not with surprise, but with memory. Because this wasn't the first time I'd seen life change in a single glance. The smell of oil and rust still lives at the edge of my nerves. It was 15 years ago. I'd been fixing the water valve next to the washer. It was a Saturday, I remember, because I was wearing Blake's old college sweatshirt and humming Springsteen. Then I heard it. A thud. Metal on concrete. Then silence. I ran to the garage, and there he was, Roger, my husband of 30 years, lying next to the car, his wrench still in hand. I dropped the pliers, slipped on motor oil, my hands shaking. I reached for him. His chest barely moved, his eyes wide but not seeing. I remember yelling. I remember fumbling for the phone. I remember the line being dead because the electrician had promised to rewire it Monday. And I remember screaming into nothing as the man I built a life with slipped away in front of me. The garage never smelled the same after that. Neither did the house. The first boardroom I ever sat in had a walnut table that stretched longer than my car. I was the only woman at the table. They gave me a water bottle while everyone else had sparkling Pellegrino. One of the men, Evan, I think, smirked and said, "Don't worry, sweetheart. You'll get the hang of it." I didn't say a word. I slid my folder across the table. Inside it, a quarterly report more accurate than anything the CFO had presented. 5-year tax projection tables, risk breakdown, predictive modeling, all color-coded. The room fell quiet. 2 months later, they asked me to lead the audit team. I didn't smile. I just said, "I'll need a better chair." I stared at the still frame on the monitor. Samantha's eyes, focused, sharp. She didn't inherit that from me. I'd spent years convincing myself I was being paranoid. reading too much into her indifference, her carefully veiled contempt, the way she handled my son like a PR campaign. But this was confirmation. I reached for a sticky note and wrote down the timestamp. Then, almost without thinking, I whispered aloud, "When a woman starts smiling too much and caring too suddenly, check your wine, cellar, and your heart." I leaned back, closed my eyes. Something inside me began to shift, not like a fire-catching spark. Number. It was slower, like the sound of a key turning in a long-forgotten lock. I didn't cry, didn't shake, didn't even sigh. Instead, I reached for the drawer where I kept my old briefcase. The leather was worn, the clasps a little stiff, but inside was every document I ever kept that mattered. Copies of the company sale, power of attorney files, property titles, the living trust. I placed the timestamp note inside, and then one more thing, a photograph, faded, taken in that same house 25 years ago. Roger. Blake, age 7. Me, holding the chipped champagne glass, smiling wide in front of a cake I had baked myself. The same glass, the same smile, but everything else had changed. The fluorescent lights in the hospital never flicker, but they always hum, softly, like something breathing in the walls. I sat on the gray bench in the hallway outside the ER, my hands still steady, folded neatly in my lap. Nurses moved past with quiet urgency. Somewhere down the corridor, a child cried and a monitor beeped out the slow, tired rhythm of someone else's life. Samantha stood near the swinging double doors, speaking in loud bursts to the intake nurse. "She was fine just a minute ago," she repeated over and over again, her voice climbing in pitch. "She said she was dizzy and then she just collapsed. Oh God, my mother. She dabbed at her cheeks with a napkin. Not a tissue, a napkin from the buffet table. I noticed it still had a faint shimmer of gold foil where the caterer had embossed my initials. R.C. Blake hovered next to her. He touched her elbow once, asked the nurse something else, nodded, furrowed his brow. The husband role, the son-in-law act, it was all being performed to perfection. But when his eyes flicked over to me, just for a moment, they didn't look confused or concerned or even curious. They looked distant, not empty, walled off. He didn't walk toward me. He didn't say, "Are you okay, Mom?" He didn't sit beside me like he used to when he scraped his knees or had a nightmare about the thunder. Number. He stood there, hands in his pockets, like I was someone's aunt from out of town, or worse, a stranger who had wandered too close to family business. I glanced down at my hands. The skin had thinned over the years, and the veins now rose like old rivers beneath the surface. But they hadn't shaken. Not once, since Carol collapsed. They still didn't. The nurse reappeared through the ER doors and murmured something to Samantha. Carol was stable, conscious, groggy. They needed to run more tests, possible allergic reaction. Samantha gasped, clutched her chest like a scene from daytime television, and rushed inside. Blake remained in the hallway. I stood, walked toward him slowly. The air felt colder here, despite the smell of antiseptic. I could feel the silence stretching between us like a sheet of ice. He looked at me when I stopped, but not into me, just at me. "I called an Uber for you," he said, eyes flicking to his phone. "I figured you'd want to rest." I tilted my head. "Blake, I drove myself." He blinked once. "Right." Then nothing. I waited for the questions, for anything that sounded like my son. Instead, I said carefully, "Are you all right?" He nodded too quickly. "Yeah, it's a lot, and then almost too casual. You didn't drink, right?" There it was. I watched his eyes closely. That question, it wasn't curiosity, it was relief. I didn't answer. Instead, I let my mind slip back, farther than a hospital hallway could contain. He was 7, maybe 8. He loved to draw, not dinosaurs or race cars, but houses, detailed ones, with shingles and chimneys and bay windows. "So you never get rained on," he told me once. He used to drag his blanket into my room during storms and curl up at the foot of my bed, clutching his sketch pad like a teddy bear. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night and find him fast asleep with crayons still in his hand, pages torn from coloring books tucked around him like paper armor. He'd hum when he was concentrating, little broken tunes, like birds that didn't know the full song but tried anyway. And now, he stood beside me, grown, clean-shaven, successful, but silent, deliberately, profoundly silent. I turned slightly, just enough to see him without meeting his eyes. "It's strange," I said softly, "how silence can say more than any lie ever could." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. I turned to leave. The Uber wasn't mine, but the decision to walk away certainly was. As I stepped toward the elevator, I heard his voice behind me, low, clipped. "You think I knew, don't you?" I didn't turn. I only whispered, "I think." "You didn't ask." And the doors closed in front of me. It was 3:12 a.m. I was at the kitchen table, the only light coming from the stovetop lamp overhead, casting long shadows over the open binder in front of me. The house, once filled with laughter and midnight footsteps, now only creaked under its own weight. The kettle wasn't on. The wine was corked. No distractions tonight, just me. And the numbers. I flipped the first tab of the binder, labeled Blake in my own handwriting. The ink had bled a little over time, probably from the summer it sat too close to the window. Receipts, bank transfers, tuition letters, unpaid dental insurance premiums, a car down payment from 2019. Every document dated, clipped, carefully preserved, because I didn't want to forget how I helped. Or maybe I feared I might someday need to prove it. There were Post-its still stuck between some of the pages, with my old notes in faded blue ink. Tuition shortfall, $3,200. Said school raised fees. Again. Carol's outpatient therapy, temporary expense. New crib for baby Ava. Sam said registry was already wiped out. I reached for my calculator. Not my phone. The old one, solar-powered. The one I used to keep in my office drawer back when I still had quarterly reports and payroll spreadsheets to worry about. I started adding $9,000 for Blake's grad school tuition one summer when the fellowship fell through, $1,700 for Carol's physical therapy after her accident, $13,000. The surprise tax bill when Samantha decided to sell her stocks early without filing correctly, a $400 bottle warmer, a $780 stroller, a $10,000 kitchen remodel loan that never returned, line by line, memory by memory, excuse by excuse. And not once, not a single entry, was there a word like borrow or repay. Number. It had always been, "Can you help just this once? It's not much. We just need a little breathing room. You're the only one we can count on." I totaled it, then did it again because the number startled me the first time. $317,800 in just the past 5 years. That didn't count the decades before, when Blake was younger. Didn't count the private school tuition I chose instead of saving for a vacation. Didn't count the mortgage I co-signed for when they said the bank just needed a stronger credit anchor. I sat back in the chair, binder open, calculator still glowing with the final figure. There was a pain in my lower back, a dull pull from sitting too long, but it felt deserved. Like some part of me thought the ache would make the number more justifiable. I remembered the time I skipped my annual checkup because Blake said Ava needed speech therapy, and they were short that month. The time Samantha cried on the phone because her mother couldn't afford assisted living, and they didn't want to seem ungrateful, but also couldn't afford to take her in. So I paid the deposit. So many moments, so many justifications, so many blindfolds I willingly tied across my own eyes. Voiceover in my own mind. I used to call that love. Now I call it a payment plan for betrayal. I traced one old receipt, Blake's name on it, from the university bookstore, and felt a strange shiver. Not from regret, from realization. They never even pretended to treat it like debt, because in their minds, I owed them, for raising them, for being alive, for choosing to stay useful when I could have demanded more. My kindness had been processed as convenience, my savings account, their safety net, my retirement fund, a family bailout program, and now they toasted me with champagne and tried to erase me in the same breath. I closed the binder, not loudly, quietly, deliberately, as if tucking in a sleeping child for the last time, knowing they would never be the same when they woke. I stood, stretched, turned off the stove light, and in that darkness, with nothing but the red glow of the ovens, clock blinking 3:48 a.m., I whispered to no one, I won't fund my own erasure anymore. I called Spencer Green at exactly 8 a.m. We'd worked together nearly 2 decades. He helped set up my company's early licensing agreements back when it was just me, a garage, and a team of interns. He was never one for pleasantries, which suited me just fine today. By 10:15 a.m., I was seated in his office, high above the city in a room filled with chrome, case files, and the quiet rustle of legal certainties. Ruth, he greeted me without standing. I read the news. Quite a retirement party. I gave him a look. He raised both hands. Too soon. Got it. He motioned for me to sit. I handed him a folder, handwritten notes, a draft of my original will, and my updated list of requests. He skimmed through silently. I want everything restructured, I said, starting today. He glanced up, glasses low on the bridge of his nose. Define everything. Property, investments. The trust fund I set up for Ava, I took a breath. I want all assets moved into a private trust with medical contingencies in place, including a mental competency clause that requires an independent physician of my choosing. No family overrides. He raised an eyebrow, nodded once, and made a note. What triggered this? Something in your champagne? I looked at him flatly. Yes. His pen paused. That was enough. I have 3 unopened bottles left, I continued. Same brand. Same shipment. They were part of the party order. I want them tested. Comprehensive toxicology screen. And I want the report sealed, dated, notarized. He didn't even flinch. We'll send them to a private lab. I know someone discreet. Same team that handles political scandals and pharmaceutical leaks. You'll have results in 72 hours. I nodded. I don't want it leaked. Not yet, just documented. Spencer leaned back, tapping his pen on the table. This is serious, Ruth. A trust is easy, medical clauses too. But if you're suggesting criminal intent... I'm not suggesting, I said coolly. I'm documenting. In silence, he gave a slow nod. Good. Keep talking. I tapped the edge of my folder. I also want my power of attorney restructured. I'm removing Blake. I'll name the trustee from your office and the healthcare proxy. Same. I want nothing left that they could manipulate if I were to become inconvenient to care for. He made another note. For a moment, the room was quiet. Then he looked at me more closely. Ruth, you've always been sharp, ruthless when needed. But this? He tapped the folder. This feels like war prep. I didn't look away. If they plan to play legal games, I'll speak in their language. I won't shout. I won't beg. I'll notarize. He gave a short laugh, not mocking, more like admiration mixed with concern. Ruth Carrington, turning silent. Warfare into estate planning. I'd buy tickets to that courtroom. I'm not going to court, I replied, unless they take me there. This is insurance. We sat for another 20 minutes, refining every clause. I signed and initialed pages without hesitation. Final page, signature line. I paused. Add one more clause, I said. If any beneficiary attempts to challenge the trust in court, they are immediately disqualified from inheritance. No exception, no mediation, instant disinheritance. Spencer blinked, then smiled. Ah, the good old poison pill clause. Irony intended? I didn't smile back. His grin faded. He nodded and added it. As he gathered the papers, he glanced up one last time. You know, I've advised clients through divorces, embezzlement, even corporate espionage, but I've never seen a grandmother armor herself like this. I'm not armoring, I said softly. I'm disarming the weapon they thought I wouldn't recognize. He said nothing after that, just collected the documents, slid them into a fireproof envelope, and stood to walk me out. On the elevator ride down, my reflection stared back at me in the mirrored doors. Not angry, not frightened, prepared, and very, very still. Blake showed up on a Thursday afternoon holding a familiar white box tied with red string. From Carrington's Bakery, my favorite. The place I used to walk him to every Friday after school, back when all he wanted was a powdered jelly donut and to hold my hand a little longer. He smiled like the boy he once was. I smiled back like the mother he'd forgotten I still am. I thought you might like these, he said, placing the box on the kitchen counter like a peace offering. I nodded slowly. Thank you. Haven't been by there in years. He looked around the kitchen. Looks just the same, Mom. Like time stopped in here. It never really does, I replied. We just stop noticing it moving. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me, elbows grazing the mahogany table his father once built. For a moment, it almost felt normal, until he began. I've been thinking, Mom, he said, eyes scanning the room too often, about you. About everything. You're alone here. This house. It's big. Old like me, I offered with a smirk. He winced, just a flicker. That's not what I meant. But it was. I'm just saying, he continued, soft but rehearsed, living alone can be dangerous. Accidents, you know. A fall, a gas leak. Even healthy people. Things happen. His tone was gentle. Too gentle. Like someone stroking a cat before locking it in a cage. I'm healthy, I said calmly. In case you missed it, I ran a multi-million-dollar firm until last month. My reflexes are still good enough to dodge emotional traps. He gave a short, nervous laugh. That's not what this is. Of course not, I said, reaching for the bakery box. What is this? Then he looked down. We've just been thinking. Samantha and I. There's this place. It's not a home. It's more like a resort. Independent living, full amenities, just peace of mind. You'd be around people your age. I bit into a Madeline and let the silence hang. Peace of mind. For whom? You've been thinking about that, I said evenly. How thoughtful. He shifted in his seat. And we could help with logistics. You know, paperwork, financial transitions, if you need support managing decisions. There it was. I swallowed slowly. You want me to transfer control, I said. Not a question, a fact. Not control, he rushed. Assistance, temporary even. Just while you adjust, these things can be overwhelming. I sipped my tea. Bitter. Oversteeped. I remember when you were 7, I began. You got your finger caught in the shed door. You didn't cry, just looked up at me and said, "It hurts, but I didn't scream, so it's okay, right?" He blinked. I cleaned the cut, held you until you fell asleep, I continued. You trusted me then. Do you trust me now? His eyes flickered. Something passed through him. Shame, maybe, or calculation. I do, Mom. Of course I do. Good, I said, folding my hands. Because I don't need a home with fountains and book clubs. I need a son who doesn't confuse inheritance with entitlement. He flinched. A micro spike of truth landed between us. I just worry, he mumbled. Is that a crime? I looked at him. Really looked. Past the thinning hairline, past the careful words. I looked for my husband in his jawline, my younger self in his hands, and I saw nothing. Or maybe too much. My voice, when it came, was low and even. "You've been lying by omission, Blake. You knew something about that champagne, maybe not the whole plan, but you knew something. And you sat beside me at that table like it was just another Sunday dinner." His mouth opened, closed. No denial came. "Do you want to know what hurts more than attempted betrayal?" I asked, leaning forward. "It's the part of me that still hopes you were forced into it. That maybe she threatened you, twisted your arm, or filled your head with desperation." He looked away. "That hope," I whispered, "is what's killing me slowly. Not the poison, not the loneliness, not even you. It's the part of me that still wants to believe you're my son, not just her husband." Blake stood suddenly. The chair screeched back. "I'll talk to Samantha," he said, voice tight. "Maybe we all need some space." I nodded. "Yes, let's all take a little space." He left without taking the pastries. I sat alone at the table, staring at the red string still curled like a noose around the box. I didn't offer them tea, just seats in the living room. Clean, too clean. The kind of clean you do when you expect guests, not family. The kind of clean that smells like lemon-scented pretense. Samantha walked in like she owned the place, holding a sleek manila folder with a branded gold-embossed logo, Sage Hollow, where golden years shine brighter. Blake followed, quieter, eyes darting to the fireplace mantel, and then to the corner where my old violin stood in its case. He used to ask me to play when he had nightmares. Tonight, he didn't even look me in the eye. "We wanted to talk in person," Samantha began, her voice smooth like sail silk. "It's not an easy topic, but we're doing this because we care, Ruth. They always say your name when they're about to rob you of something." She laid the folder on the table with the theatrical flair of someone unveiling a luxury cruise. "It's called Sage Hollow. It's not a home, more like a wellness community. Private suites, chef-prepared meals, massage therapy, and the staff, all certified." She flipped pages like she was selling me a timeshare. "Look, weekly yoga, art classes, day trips to vineyards." She leaned in with that curated smile. "And no pressure to do anything you don't want. It's completely independent. You'd have your own unit, Ruth. Complete privacy." I glanced at Blake. He was pretending to study the brochure, but his foot tapped involuntarily. Samantha pushed forward. "We've spoken to a relocation consultant. They'd handle everything, moving, organizing, insurance. We'd even help you sell the house if you'd like. Of course, only if you're ready." "And the paperwork?" I asked, letting my voice fall into that gentle curiosity older women are expected to carry. "Oh, that's the best part," she chirped. "We've already drawn up the preliminary agreement. You just sign the authorization and power of attorney forms here." She flipped to the last page. "And we'd manage the rest." She handed me a pen. Not a moment of hesitation. No shame in her eyes. Just confidence. Expectation. A woman who thought the show was already sold. I took the pen slowly, turning it in my hand. It had their initials engraved. B and S, Blake and Samantha, or maybe Bait and Switch. "You've really thought of everything," I murmured. Samantha beamed. "We just want what's best for you." Voiceover, in my own mind. What's best for me? Or for your future inheritance? Blake finally spoke. "We worry about you, Mom. You've been alone a lot. After Dad. And with the company gone, there's less structure, less to wake up for. We just thought this could give you a new purpose. Something nurturing." I looked at my son. There was no venom in his voice, but there was calculation. A quiet rehearsal of lines spoken in a mirror, approved by his wife, stripped of sincerity. "Structure," I repeated. "You think I lack structure?" He winced. "That's not what I meant." Samantha jumped back in. "It's not about what's missing, it's about what's next. Think of this as a retirement gift to yourself. Blake and I are covering the first year's costs. All you have to do is say yes. All I have to do, I thought, is give you the keys to everything I built with bleeding hands and sleepless nights. I didn't raise my voice, didn't slam the folder shut, didn't accuse. That's the thing about surviving long enough. You realize the most dangerous weapon isn't a scream. It's silence, wrapped in civility. I looked down at the folder, then back up at Samantha. "Would you mind sending me the full details via email?" I asked sweetly. "I'm old-fashioned, yes, but I still like to read fine print under my own roof." "Alone." Samantha blinked. "Oh, of course. Yes, absolutely. And give me a few days," I added. "This is a big decision. I want to be fair to you both. If I do this, I want it to be right." "Not rushed." Blake seemed relieved. "That makes sense. Thank you, Mom, really." Samantha stood, smoothing her blazer. "Take your time." "We'll check in end of the week?" I nodded. "End of the week." I walked them to the door. As they stepped outside, Samantha turned with that perfectly timed glance. "You'll love the gardens, Ruth." Sage Hollow's roses are award-winning, I smiled. "Funny." So were mine, until someone forgot to water them. Her smile faltered for just a breath. They left. I stood in the entryway long after their car disappeared from the drive. Voiceover. The scariest part wasn't their planning. It wasn't even the documents or the folders or the signatures they tried to slide past me like napkins at dinner. The scariest part was that they didn't think I'd see it, that they believed I was too sentimental, too old, too blind to recognize a velvet noose. I closed the door, and I locked it. Not because I feared them, but because I just confirmed what I already knew. The war had begun. I cleaned the kitchen like a ritual, slow, silent, methodical. Not because it needed to be cleaned, but because I needed something to do with my hands that didn't involve signing papers or stabbing hearts. The party dishes had long been stacked and put away, champagne flutes rinsed, dried, forgotten like the promises made that evening, but there was one item left behind. At the far end of the counter, beneath the edge of the dish towel, it sat. The glass. The one with the chip. I picked it up gently, holding it at the base like I always did. The rim was smooth until it wasn't, until your finger snagged the tiniest imperfection, a shallow crescent, barely visible, but to me as familiar as the scar on my wrist from a childhood fall. Its weight had never changed. Neither had the way it caught the light. It was Blake's doing, that chip. He was 12 when he knocked it off the drying rack, trying to sneak a cookie behind my back. I heard the crash and came running, expecting broken shards and tears, but the glass had survived, only a blemish at the stem. Blake was already in tears, thinking I'd be furious, but I remember kneeling beside him, holding his small, trembling hands, and telling him, "Some things, even when chipped, are worth keeping, if they're held with love." That moment had stayed with me, longer than the glass itself. Back then, the chip had been a reminder of forgiveness. Now, it was something else entirely. I set the glass down on a linen napkin. The same chip, the same weight, the same subtle curve, except this time it had been chosen. Samantha had picked this glass out of dozens. She had watched me take it from the tray. She had kept glancing at it, not casually, but with calculation, like a person waiting for the switch to flip, or for a candle's wick to finally kiss the flame. The memory of her fingers brushing the rim flashed back, like static on a tape. She didn't pour anything from a visible bottle, no dramatic dropper, no smoke, no smell. Just a tiny movement, shielded by her posture, masked by a laugh, subtle, precise, deadly. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes on the security footage, I might have doubted myself, might have thought I was being paranoid. But there was something about her gaze, the way it lingered, not on me, on the glass, on this glass, and that was deliberate. I studied it again, innocent, ordinary, damning. You see, it's not always poison that kills. Sometimes it's the belief that you won't notice the poison at all. I held it in my hand for another few seconds, feeling the coolness of the glass against my palm. Then I walked to the hall closet, opened the wooden box where I kept old deeds and death certificates, and placed the glass carefully inside, wrapped in linen, not hidden, not destroyed, preserved, as evidence, as memory, as a reminder. Voiceover in my mind, not all scars are visible. Some take the shape of a crescent moon on the side of a champagne flute. Some shimmer in crystal silence until someone decides it's time to use them. I closed the box, latched it, and stood there for a long time, one hand still resting on the lid. Outside, the wind shook the dry magnolia leaves. Inside, the only thing that moved was the weight in my chest, shifting from grief to clarity. If they could turn this chipped glass into a weapon, then maybe so could I. The call came at 7:13 a.m. I hadn't slept. Spencer's name lit up my screen, the way a surgeon's scalpel might catch light just before the incision. I answered without a word. He got straight to it. It's alkaloid-based, extracted from rhododendron, commonly found in ornamental gardens. It's slow-acting, Ruth, not fatal, but potent enough to induce dizziness, slurred speech, unconsciousness. I closed my eyes. The scent of the champagne still lingered in my mind, the chip on the glass, the way Carol collapsed like a marionette with her strings cut. He continued, "In an elderly patient? It would look like a stroke, a sudden one, especially if they have a known history of stress or high blood pressure." I didn't respond immediately. Just walked to the kitchen, opened the blinds. The sun was already slicing through the fog like a blade through silk. "So," I said slowly, "perfect for staging an emergency. One that might require hospitalization or a guardianship." Hearing Spencer exhaled. "Yes. And if you hadn't switched glasses, Ruth, this could have been a very different conversation." I almost laughed, but my voice caught in the back of my throat, somewhere between rage and something that felt suspiciously like grief. "It's never just about money," I whispered. "It's about access. Power. They don't want to inherit. They want to manage." "Which is why," he replied evenly, "I think it's time to install full interior surveillance. Not just the front door, living room, kitchen, hallway, bedroom too, if you're comfortable." I nodded to no one. Let them play checkers. I'm building a chessboard. There was silence on the line. Then Spencer said, "Do you want me to file a police report?" "No," I said. "Not yet." "Why?" "Because the moment I file that report, the game changes. It becomes public, and they'll turn the tables, paint me as paranoid. Or worse, unstable. You're not wrong." "I don't want to win their way," I continued. "I want to win so clean they choke on their own intentions." Another pause. Then Spencer's voice dropped. "You've always been surgical, Ruth. I used to wonder how you negotiated those mergers. Now I know." I didn't reply. I was already pulling a legal pad from the drawer. One column, what they know. The other, what they think I don't. Under the second, I wrote, "Security footage, champagne residue, camera system incoming, lab report in hand." I underlined the last one twice. "You still have the bottle?" Spencer asked. "I do." "Lock it up. Chain of custody matters." "I know." We hung up shortly after that. I didn't need more advice. I needed execution. Within 2 hours, I had a team of discreet contractors installing pinhole cameras inside light fixtures and smoke detectors. Spencer's firm took care of the logistics. Quietly, professionally. They'd done this for CEOs worried about insider theft. Now they were doing it for a woman whose son might be plotting her demise. I walked past the glass cabinet where the chipped flute used to live, now empty. Funny how you never realize you're under attack until you stop mistaking betrayal for love. I ran a fingertip along the cabinet's edge. Cold, smooth. If they returned, if they dared return, I'd be ready. Ready with footage, ready with truth, ready with the strength of a woman who'd built her empire from nothing and watched it all be reduced, in their eyes, to a vulnerable heartbeat in an aging chest. If they wanted to kill me with a heart attack, I turned toward the camera installers, nodded at the hallway placement, then headed to the back room where my late husband's old filing cabinet still stood. I whispered, "Then I'll make sure their hearts skip first." And this time, not from poison, but from fear. Hospitals have a particular silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that holds its breath, the kind that waits. I stood at the nurse's station just outside room 306, holding a paper cup of coffee I had no intention of drinking. It had been 48 hours since the party, 48 hours since Carol dropped like a puppet with her strings cut. I'd been here twice already, turned away both times by Samantha. The first time with a thin smile, the second with a look that could freeze rain. "You're not on the approved list, Ruth," she'd said. "Only family allowed." So this morning, I came early. Earlier than family hours, earlier than gatekeeping. I spotted Samantha in the waiting lounge, heels crossed, reading something on her phone with a concerned expression that felt so well practiced. I approached her with the calm of someone who has already decided how this ends. "She's my friend," I said. "My age, my history. I have a right to check on her." Samantha didn't move. "She's recovering. We don't want her stressed. I won't stress her," I said, tilting my head, "unless you think the truth is stressful." That got her eyes up. That flash of calculation, not fear yet, but awareness. "I'll only be 5 minutes," I said, brushing past her before she could protest. Carol lay in bed, elevated slightly, a nasal cannula feeding her air, IV lines dripping something clear and slow. Her skin was pale, lips dry, but her eyes were open, dull, but awake. She turned when she saw me. Recognition flickered, her lips moved. "Ruth." I stepped closer and sat down. My voice was soft. "How are you feeling?" Her eyelids fluttered. "Like someone unplugged me and forgot to plug me back in." I reached for her hand, cold, fragile, but she held on. "I just wanted to see you. Make sure you're okay." She swallowed hard, then whispered, "Did I ruin the party?" I smiled faintly. "Let's just say the dancing stopped early." Her laugh came out like wind through leaves. She coughed. We sat like that for a moment. Then her fingers twitched in mine. She looked at the door, then back at me, lowered her voice. "I didn't take anything," she said. "No new medication, no alcohol intolerance. I've had champagne 100 times." "I know," I said gently. "But there was something weird," she continued, "in the glass. A smell, faint, floral, but not like perfume." I leaned in. "Do you remember anything else?" Carol paused, then frowned. 3 nights before, Samantha came by, said she was making a sleep blend for you, wanted to borrow my valerian extract and garden oil. I froze. "She said it helped her mother-in-law sleep peacefully," Carol added, eyes searching mine. "She said you were restless." My throat tightened. She asked me which oils mix well and how much was just enough to relax someone. I didn't think much of it. But now, she shook her head slowly. "Ruth, I don't think she meant to harm me. I think she thought you'd be the one drinking that glass." I nodded once. "You're right." I saw her spike my glass. I switched it when she wasn't looking. Carol's eyes welled with realization. She used me as a test run. I held her hand tighter. "I need your help," I said, "when the time comes. When the truth needs a voice that isn't mine." Carol took a shaky breath. "If I'm still breathing by then," she whispered, attempting a wry smile. "You will be," I said. "You're stronger than you look." She nodded barely. "Just promise me. You won't confront her without protection." "I won't," I lied. We sat in silence for a beat. Then Carol added, "She thinks I don't remember anything." That I'll chalk it up to age. She's already told the nurses I've been forgetful lately. I swallowed the knot in my chest. "She's building a case," I said, "against both of us. But she's not the only one with a voice," Carol replied, surprising me with the clarity in her tone. I leaned in, kissed her forehead. "I'll make sure yours is heard," I whispered. As I left the room, I passed Samantha in the hall. She stood, arms crossed. Was she awake? "She was," I said, "clear as ever." Samantha's smile twitched. "Did she say anything?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Yes. She said she remembers everything," and I walked away. The thing about betrayal is it rarely happens in a single moment. It accumulates, like debt, small withdrawals of trust until the account is drained dry. That's why I called Patricia Walker. Patricia was the kind of woman who wore steel-toed boots with tailored suits, a private investigator who had built her career, untangling fraud, tracing hidden accounts, and reminding wealthy clients why paranoia was just another word for survival. I'd used her before, once years ago to vet a potential investor. She saved me from signing away a quarter of my company. Now I asked her to vet my own family. She didn't blink. "Send me their full names, DOBS, and last known addresses. Give me 48 hours, I gave her 24. She delivered in 18. Her report was a stack of printouts and photocopies dropped on my doorstep in a plain envelope. I read it at the kitchen table, the chipped glass box still hidden in the closet behind me. First page, mortgage records. Blake and Samantha had refinanced their home, twice, in the last 5 years, each time draining equity, each time claiming renovations that never materialized. The debt sat there like mildew under fresh paint. Second page, credit card statements. Over $100,000 across 5 accounts. Interest piled like snow on a roof, threatening collapse. Designer purchases, travel, business expenses that read more like desperate vacations. Third page, Blake's firm. Losses 3 years running, negative margins. He'd been propping it up with borrowed money and his wife's illusion of prosperity. I read each line like scripture, letting the truth settle into my bones. And then I reached the twist. Samantha had purchased a life insurance policy, value $750,000. Policyholder, me. Beneficiary, her. Registered under the category of caregiver. I laughed then, quiet but sharp. They'd been calling me a burden for months. Too old, too fragile, too much. Yet in black and white fine print, I was suddenly worth $750,000 if I conveniently stopped breathing. Voiceover in my mind. They called me dead weight. But it seems even dead weight can be monetized. $1 million liability disguised as love. I traced Samantha's signature at the bottom of the form. Bold, clean, certain. Patricia had included a note clipped to the file. "Ruth, I don't like this." Most insurers require proof of insurable interest. She must have framed it as caregiving, which means she's been planning a narrative. You're unstable. You need supervision. She's the selfless one who steps in. Be careful, careful. I folded the report and placed it back in the envelope. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. What I felt was colder, calmer. Because now there were no illusions left. Not about Blake's business. Not about their house of cards. Not about the narrative they were weaving for courts, for doctors, for the insurance company. And certainly not about the glass with the chip. I sat back, staring at the darkened kitchen window, my reflection faint and ghost-like against the glass. They thought I was predictable, that grief and age dulled my edges, that I'd sign papers out of fatigue, nod along out of confusion, surrender out of guilt. But business had taught me one thing: always read the fine print. Always. So I whispered it aloud to no one but myself and the quiet kitchen. They want to cash me out. But I've spent 70 years learning how to hold value, and I won't go cheap, I slid the envelope into the same closet where the chipped glass lay. Evidence and motive side by side. Insurance, in every sense of the word. Sunday morning always held a certain kind of stillness. A deceptive quiet, the kind that made you think nothing bad could happen before noon. Maybe that's why I chose it. I told them I was ready. Blake and Samantha arrived right at 10 a.m., like clockwork. Samantha wore a pale cream blouse with gold buttons, her version of respectable, and Blake looked like he hadn't slept. A folder bulged under his arm, documents neatly stacked, ready for a signature. I had set the table with fresh croissants and marmalade, made tea just the way Blake liked when he was 12. But their eyes weren't on the food. They were scanning for something else. Control. "Mom," Samantha smiled, sliding into the seat across from me. "We're just so relieved you've come to your senses." I returned her smile. "Well, it's a lot to think about. But yes, I've made my decision." She patted my hand gently, like a hospice nurse. "You won't regret it. Sage Hollow has a greenhouse, Tai Chi, even watercolor classes, and everything's already arranged. We just need your signature." She opened the folder. Durable power of attorney, transfer of assets, medical directives, bank authorizations. Blake said nothing. His eyes scanned line by line, checking if anything had changed. He didn't ask if I was sure. He didn't ask if I was scared. He didn't ask how I'd been. He just flipped pages. That silence told me everything. I looked at him. Not as a mother desperate to be seen, but as a woman studying a stranger who once lived inside her house. "I just have one small request," I said, my voice soft. "Do you mind if I have my lawyer witness the signing?" "It's a big step, just a formality." Samantha hesitated, smile faltering for a split second. "Oh, of course. But maybe later today? We really should get these papers to the notary before the weekend ends." Blake added quickly, "We can get a neutral witness, maybe even the bank manager." "No need to bother Spencer." I folded my hands over the top of the file. "He's already on his way." Footsteps echoed from the hallway. Spencer entered, suit pressed, briefcase in hand. But he wasn't alone. Behind him walked two plainclothes officers, calm, professional, very alert. "Good morning," Spencer nodded at them, then at me. "I believe this is the signing?" Samantha's face went pale. Blake froze mid-turn of a page. The taller officer stepped forward, badge discreet but visible. "Mrs. Samantha Carrington?" he asked. She didn't speak. "We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding a bottle of champagne served at a party held at this residence 3 weeks ago. Specifically, regarding substances detected in a glass that led to a hospitalization." Blake's voice cracked. "Wait, what is this?" "What's going on?" I looked at my son, and for once, I didn't look away. "This is what happens," I said slowly, "when people assume the person they're trying to bury won't dig first." Samantha stammered something. I didn't hear the words. The officers guided her toward the front door, gently but firmly. Blake stayed frozen, his mouth slack. I stood. "Blake, would you like some tea?" He didn't answer. I poured it anyway. Earl Grey. Hot. Just like when he was 12. The living room was colder than it should have been, considering the fire had been lit an hour ago. Or maybe it was just the silence. Thick, tense, clinging to the walls like frost. Blake sat on the edge of the leather armchair, his fingers twitching against his knee. Samantha stood by the window, her arms folded tight, as if that might hold her story together. Across from them, Spencer placed a folder on the coffee table with surgical precision. Beside him, Detective Morrison clicked open a narrow silver case. His face betrayed nothing but methodical purpose. "I'll get to the point," Morrison said, looking from one to the other. "The lab results confirm the presence of grayanotoxin, an alkaloid derived from rhododendron, found in the remaining champagne from your retirement party, Mrs. Carrington." He turned slightly toward Samantha. "It's not commonly used." Certainly not something one might confuse with lavender oil or essential extracts. It causes temporary paralysis, unconsciousness, and mimics stroke-like symptoms. Samantha's voice broke through like glass under pressure. Wait, no! That's not... I didn't mean... My mother must have... She drank from the wrong glass. I didn't move, just sipped from the same teacup I'd been drinking from all morning. It wasn't the chipped one, of course. That was sealed away in a velvet-lined box. Spencer opened the folder. You'll want to see this. He slid out printed frames from the security footage. My kitchen cam, quietly watching from behind the ceramic rooster on the top shelf. One image showed Samantha reaching into her bag. Another slipping a small vial behind her wrist. The next tilting it over the glass, the one with the chip. Then came the insurance policy. $750,000. Beneficiary, Samantha Carrington. Owner, Ruth Carrington. Purpose, coverage for full-time caregiving responsibilities. Spencer laid it down gently, like a final nail. Dated 2 weeks before the incident. That's an interesting timeline. Samantha's face drained of color. That's not... It was Blake's idea. She turned toward my son, desperate. Tell them. Tell them we didn't. Blake, please. But Blake just stared at his hands, as if they weren't his, as if he wasn't sure what they were capable of anymore. I stood. The air shifted when I did. It wasn't a dramatic rise, just a quiet gathering of breath and resolve. You chose the chipped glass, I said. My voice was calm, too calm. That one had a small crack at the base. It's the only glass I ever drink from. You noticed that. You used it against me. She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. You didn't count on me noticing you noticing it. You didn't count on Carol drinking from it instead. But here's the thing. I turned toward Morrison, then back to Samantha. Intent doesn't care about execution. You tried. You failed. But you tried. Samantha's breath came in shallow bursts now. It was just a little something to help you sleep. I didn't mean to... You meant to make me fall. Quietly. Without a trace, Spencer didn't need a cue. Morrison had already stood up. He pulled the handcuffs from his belt like he'd done it 100 times before. Mrs. Samantha Carrington, he began. You are under arrest for attempted poisoning and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. The words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. Click. The cuffs locked around her wrists. Her mouth opened again, but nothing came out. Only her eyes darted around, looking for Blake. But Blake didn't move. He sat there, frozen in the same position, the folder still open on the table in front of him. I turned to him last, not with anger. That had passed. What was left was something colder. Disappointment crystallized. It wasn't because you held the vial, I said. It was because you didn't stop her. His eyes met mine, finally. For the first time in years, I saw him. Not the boy I raised, not the man I had hoped he would become. Just Blake, conflicted, complicit, and cowardly. I stepped forward. There was a moment, 100 of them, where you could have said, "This isn't right." But you didn't. You let her speak for both of you. And now, both of you will answer for it. I turned away before he could respond. Some truths don't need rebuttals. Some silences say everything. After they took Samantha away, the silence in my living room felt almost sacred. The door had closed behind her with a click that seemed to echo through my bones. Blake hadn't moved. He sat where he was, elbows on knees, eyes fixed on the rug like it might offer redemption. Then quietly, almost like an apology, he whispered, "Mom." It was the first time he'd called me that in months, maybe longer. His voice cracked. I didn't know it would go that far. She said you were vulnerable, that you needed someone to protect you, that this was the only way. I said nothing. I turned my eyes toward the tea I'd poured earlier. It had gone cold in its cup, still, untouched, just like my trust. I wrapped both hands around the porcelain and looked at him. Protect me? My voice was soft. By sending me somewhere I didn't choose, where strangers would hold my pills and my wallet? By stripping me of my legal rights, my independence. Blake wiped at his eyes. I didn't sign anything. You didn't have to, I interrupted. You stood by while she did. You let her say the words. You let her drive the plan. He looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the boy he used to be, the one who brought me wildflowers from the schoolyard, the one who colored crayon hearts on my birthday cards. I wanted, God help me, I wanted to believe he was that boy again. But wishes aren't evidence. I reached for the manila envelope I had left beside my chair, opened it slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a few printed sheets. Patricia, I said calmly. My investigator recovered messages between the two of you. Screenshots, backup logs, deleted texts. None of it disappears when people think it does. I unfolded the first page and began to read aloud. If she refuses to sign, we may have to force the issue. She's not in her right mind. A minor incident could help establish grounds. That was Samantha. I looked up. His face was drained of color. Your reply, Blake. Just not at the party. I don't want Mom collapsing in front of everyone. He opened his mouth, maybe to deny, maybe to beg, but no sound came. I remember that night, I continued. I remember the way your hand hovered behind my chair, like you were watching for the fall. I remember you asking if I felt okay, right before the toast, almost like you were checking if the timing was right. His shoulders shook now, not with rage, but something messier. Shame, maybe. Or the shattering of a story he told himself to sleep at night. I didn't want you to die, he whispered. I didn't think she'd actually do it. I thought, if we nudged things a little, if we just helped things along, it would be safer. You'd be safer. With supervision. With control. You mean your control, I said, almost gently. Or hers. A long silence stretched between us. Then Blake said, almost childlike, I thought we were protecting the family. I let out a breath, half laugh, half sigh. You want to protect the family? Then try not treating its oldest member like a burden to be managed. Try seeing me as something more than an obstacle between you and comfort. I folded the papers, placed them back in the envelope. You were my son before you were her husband, I said. But lately, I don't know which title matters more to you. He swallowed hard. I never wanted to hurt you, Mom. I swear, I nodded slowly. Intentions are wind. Actions leave footprints. I stood and walked to the kitchen counter, refilled my tea with hot water from the kettle I'd kept warm on the stove. When I returned, I handed Blake a napkin. He didn't reach for it at first, then took it with shaking fingers. You're not going to press charges against me? He asked. That's not my decision anymore, I said. I gave everything I had. Truth, evidence, testimony. What happens next is between you and the law. I sipped my tea. The heat no longer comforted me, but it anchored me. He looked up, eyes red. Do you hate me? I took a long time before answering. I don't hate you, I said, but I mourn you. The boy you were, the man you could have been, and with that, I turned toward the hallway. I needed to be alone. Behind me, Blake didn't call after me. For the first time, he understood silence could speak louder than any goodbye. 3 weeks later, the azaleas bloomed along the stone path behind my house. Their purple petals trembled gently in the breeze, as if unsure whether to celebrate or mourn. I walked slowly, cane in hand, the morning chill whispering through my shawl. The air smelled of damp soil and old roots, reminders that life, buried deep, can still bloom again. The call came just as I reached the bench beneath the arbor. Spencer's name lit up my phone screen. I answered without hesitation. It's done, he said. I said nothing. Just let the words settle like dew on my skin. Samantha was indicted on charges of attempted intentional harm. he continued, voice low, careful. It won't make national news, but it's enough. The prosecution has the lab report, the texts, the surveillance. There's no version of this where she walks away clean. I exhaled. Not relief, just release. And Blake? I asked. Spencer paused. He agreed to cooperate. Signed a sworn statement confirming her actions and his knowledge of them. My fingers tightened around the cane's handle. He also signed a waiver, Spencer added, legally relinquishing all claims to your estate. He won't contest the new will. I looked out at the purple blossoms. One had fallen, landing softly on the bench beside me. I brushed it away gently, like a memory I was ready to stop clinging to. What does the new will say exactly? I asked, though I already knew. I had written it with clarity. Not vengeance. Blake will receive a stipend, Spencer said. $20,000 per year, structured, non-transferable. He cannot withdraw the principal or reassign the payments. No access to the trust beyond that. And the rest? Transferred to the Carrington Resilience Foundation, effective immediately. You retain sole control until your passing. Then, the board you selected takes over good. Not just clean, but clear. The money was never going to heal what had broken, but it could protect others from the kind of betrayal that had gutted me from the inside out. I hung up, thanking Spencer with a quiet nod he couldn't see but might have felt. Then I sat in silence beneath the arbor, listening to the wind move through the vines like a whispered confession. Somewhere nearby, a bee stirred. The world didn't care about my pain, and I found some comfort in that, because it meant I didn't owe it to anyone to explain myself anymore. These weren't just assets. They were fragments of dignity, splinters of a life built carefully, honestly, sometimes painfully. I had given, and when there was nothing left to take, they tried to take me. Not anymore. They weren't my children anymore, not in the sense that mattered. What they became, their greed, their manipulation, that was a choice they made repeatedly, and now I had made mine. These azaleas, they used to be Harold's favorite. He planted them the spring after Blake was born. He said they were quiet flowers, pretty but not showy, gentle, like the kind of love we often overlook until it's gone. I pressed my hand to my chest, just over the throb that still ached for him. "I miss you," I whispered. No reply came, of course, but the sun finally slipped through the clouds just then, a single beam stretching across the gravel like a path. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like prey. I didn't feel hunted or suspicious or tired from pretending I didn't notice. I just felt still. Voiceover. They are no longer just my money. They are the last proof of my dignity, and I choose not to let anyone insult that again. And in that silence, I knew. This was not the end. It was the part where I began again. She arrived just before sunset. I heard the soft knock on the porch door, hesitant, like someone unsure whether they were still welcome. I opened it slowly, unsure what version of the world might be standing on the other side. And there she was, Emma, 16 now, but with the same wide, questioning eyes she had as a toddler when she used to dig her tiny fingers into cookie dough beside me. "Hi, Grandma," she said, voice tight. She had grown taller. Her dark curls pulled back into a braid. She clutched her backpack with both hands like it might anchor her to this moment. My throat clenched before I could speak. "I'm so sorry," she blurted, stepping forward. "I didn't know anything. They told me you were on a trip. Then, that you were tired. They wouldn't let me call you." Her voice cracked on the last part, and suddenly the weight of everything I'd carried these past months cracked too. I opened my arms. She dropped the bag and stepped into them. We didn't speak for a long time. We just stood there. Generations between us, but hearts pressed together, letting silence do what words couldn't. Later, we sat on the porch swing. The air smelled of azaleas and soil, and the breeze had that late spring gentleness to it, like the earth itself was trying to be kind again. Emma rocked slowly beside me, eyes scanning the garden. "I always liked it here," she said softly. "It's the only place that ever felt quiet." I nodded. "Your grandfather planted those azaleas, the year your dad was born." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I miss when everything felt simpler." "Things were never simple, sweetheart," I said, "just hidden better." We rocked in rhythm for a while. A mockingbird called from somewhere nearby. Then she turned to me. "Can I ask you something?" "Really ask? Anything." "Why didn't you tell me what they did? What they tried to do to you?" I took a long breath. "Because I didn't want you to lose your childhood the same way I lost mine. I needed one of us to still believe people meant what they said." Emma looked down. "But I don't want to be protected from truth, Grandma. I want to understand it, so I can change it." I looked at her, really looked. Her jaw had the same stubborn line I used to see in the mirror when I was her age. The same flicker of something fierce behind the eyes, something too powerful to be extinguished, only redirected. "What do you want to do?" I asked. She hesitated. Then, with sudden clarity, "I want to study law." My eyebrows lifted. "Law," she nodded. "Like you once said. You told me when I was little, know the rules better than they do, then break the ones that never protected you anyway." I had forgotten saying that, but apparently she hadn't. "I want to help people keep what's theirs," she continued. "Not just money, but their voices, their choices. I don't want what happened to you to happen to anyone else." I felt something in my chest then, a kind of shift, not pain, not even pride, just completion. A new root had taken hold. "You'll need a thick skin," I said, smiling. "The law doesn't care about feelings." "But I do," she replied, "and maybe that's the difference." I reached over and took her hand in mine. "You remind me of myself." "Before I got tired, you're not tired now," she said. "You're stronger than ever." "You fought back." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I survived." "But you're the reason I chose to live. Not just keep breathing, but really live." We sat in silence, hand in hand. Then she whispered, "I missed you. I missed you too." And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. The betrayal hadn't vanished. The scars still stung when the wind hit them just right. But beside me sat the future, raw, bright, unbroken. A granddaughter who saw me not as a burden, but as a beginning. And just like that, the cycle turned. Not an ending, a new start. There's a shelf in the corner of my study, walnut, slightly bowed in the middle, old enough to creak when the air shifts. For years, it only held dust and memories. A forgotten graduation photo, a pressed rose from our 25th anniversary, the ceramic urn that holds James' ashes, flanked by a photo of him taken the summer we bought this house, shirt untucked, smile wide, as if he already knew this was where we'd grow old. Now I've added something else. The glass. The one with the small chip at the base. Barely visible unless you knew where to look. I used to reach for it out of habit, long after it had stopped being useful. It held history, a quiet kind. Blake broke it when he was 12, chasing a dog through the kitchen. I held him afterward, told him some things can still be kept, even after they're flawed. That love doesn't disappear when it's cracked. If anything, it learns to hold stronger. That day, the glass became a symbol of forgiveness, until they turned it into something else. They chose it that night. Samantha reached for it, not out of accident, but calculation. I watched her fingers hesitate, then wrap around the rim like it was any other glass. But it wasn't. It was mine. And it told me everything I needed to know. That chipped edge was a whisper of intent, of betrayal, of how well they had studied me, how deeply they thought they could erase me. But instead, I made it my witness. It was that glass and everything it carried that helped me survive. Not because it warned me, but because it reminded me that love can be repurposed, that the past can speak again in courtrooms or quiet rooms, through fingerprints or a single glint of light. Now it rests here, not hidden, not polished, just placed carefully on the shelf beside the man who taught me to trust my instincts, even when they hurt. I imagine him watching, arms folded, that half smile tugging at his lips. He would have seen through them, too, probably faster than I did. I light a candle. The flame flickers, dances briefly in the reflection of the glass, then steadies, and I whisper, more to myself than to him, "It's over now." Voiceover. What kills us is rarely the shock, it's the betrayal of the familiar. That glass was once a memory. They tried to make it a weapon, but I made it into evidence. I stepped back, closed the door, let the shelf stand as it is, quiet, unassuming, but unshaken, like me. The morning air is crisp, soft against my skin. I sit on the porch wrapped in my shawl, holding a warm cup of tea. The garden hums quietly with the sound of bees moving between azaleas and rosemary. A security camera hums faintly as it sweeps across the yard. Discreet, quiet, but always watching. It sees everything now. So do I. The house feels different these days. Not empty, just peaceful. Like it can finally breathe again, now that no one's trying to sell its silence for profit. I take a sip from my cup and let the quiet settle, not as a threat, but as a comfort. Voiceover. I've lived long enough to know not everyone born into your family is truly your kin. Not everyone who calls you mom knows how to love you like one. And just because you're older doesn't mean you should sit still and take it. I didn't break the law. I simply swept out those who tried to bend it around my neck. I chose to live. I chose to speak. And you know what? I'm still here. They're the ones who have to start over from nothing. I glance at the corner of the porch where Emma planted her first lavender bush last week. She asked if it would bloom this year. I told her maybe not, but next spring it would be glorious. Some things need time to root before they rise. Like us. Like healing. Like knowing your own worth after decades of being told you're just a burden with a bank account. And for anyone watching, listening, sitting with your own cup of something warm. Before we say goodbye, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning like mine? Or a late night where stories like this find you in the stillness? Drop a comment. I read them all, truly. Each one reminds me that we're not alone, no matter what they tried to make us believe. And if this story touched something in you, if you saw your own strength in my survival, then I hope you'll consider subscribing, not just to hear more stories like mine, but to join a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Wherever you are, whatever season you're in, I hope you carry this story with you. And remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. Take care. I'll see you in the next story.